When you center your pleasure, magical things happen. So I don't know about you, but I was not raised to consider my own pleasure. I was taught that it was my job to please others. And if I did a good job, I would get approved of. And if a man approved of me, he might pick me to stay in his life, which meant that he liked the way I pleased him and he thought it would be nice to have me pleasing him forever. So it's no surprise that I spent half of my life in automatic man-pleasing mode. Whenever I was with a guy in a romantic context, I felt responsible for him, for his mood, for whether he had a good time. And I felt responsible even if I didn't like him. It didn't matter how I felt. It was always my job to make this a good experience for him. I wish I'd known then what I know now. I wasted so much time and energy trying to be pleasing, when instead I could have been exploring my own pleasure. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, your pleasure and the power of harnessing that pleasure in your life. Hi, I'm Amy Waterman. I'm a love expert here at yourbrilliance.com and author of The Pleasure Principle. And if you are new here, I hope you stay and subscribe. Keep watching to discover practical ways to enjoy more pleasure in your life. Pleasure is such a loaded word. So what comes to mind for you when you think of pleasure? Is it a massage, a day at the beach, licking an ice cream cone in the sun? Or is it stuff like gluttony and hedonism and X-rated hijinks? Well, these days, the folks who care most about how we define pleasure are marketers, because marketers use the promise of pleasure to sell everything from cars to shampoo. And they define that pleasure in such incredibly narrow terms. So for them, pleasure is sexy, it's not comfy. For them, pleasure is chocolate cake, it's not a cup of tea. For them, pleasure is what men do to you, it's not what you do for yourself. And their goal is to get you to believe that you need what they're selling if you want to experience intense pleasure. And of course, we all want to experience intense pleasure, so we go ahead and we buy. We wash our hair with that shampoo. We drink that beverage, we spray on that perfume. And how do we feel? Not really any different from before. You see, we can't buy pleasure because pleasure is not out there. It's in here. It's in our sensory organs and our nervous system and our brain chemicals. Pleasure is a physical response to what pleases us. And what pleases each and every one of us is incredibly individual. Okay, so if pleasure is the way that your body responds to what pleases you, then how do you know what pleases you? Well, you listen to your body, not your mind. So for me, the experience of pleasure often comes with like a sigh. And I'm like, oh, that is so good. And I can feel my insides relaxing and I close my eyes. And I just take this blissful moment to savor those sensations. Now, we have to remind ourselves to actually enjoy pleasure, because how many times do you do something that you really, really enjoy, but you barely notice it because your mind is on other things? So one way I prime myself to remember pleasure is by making sure pleasure is part of my morning routine. So I won't head out the door until I've had just one moment of peace and enjoyment that I can carry with me as fuel for a long day. And for me, that happens to be my morning coffee and donut. I have 2 shots of espresso with cream and one of my insanely good homemade donuts, which I take outside and I eat on my front stoop in the sun. Now, most of us wouldn't even think about blocking out 5 minutes for pleasure that early in the morning, right? Because we're too focused on getting up and getting ready and getting out the door. It's when efficiency matters. It's how much you can get done in how little time. But maybe, just maybe, we have been sold a lie. We've been taught to be good girls and to be on time and to be productive and not let temptation derail us from a morning workout or a nutritious breakfast. It's almost like if something is pleasurable, it's suspect. Like if it's pleasurable, it cannot be good for you, because anything that gives your body pleasure must be naughty or indulgent or fattening. But in fact, your body was programmed to experience pleasure. It's a design feature. It's not a flaw. Mother Nature needed to motivate us to behave in life-affirming ways. And so she built into us this internal reward system. We get a boost of dopamine or endorphins or other happy chemicals whenever we behave in ways that ensure our survival and the survival of our species. So we are pleasure-seeking creatures, not because we have a death wish, but because we have a life wish. When we turn our back on pleasure because it's not good for us, or it's not healthy, or it's unnecessary, we are turning our backs on life. A life without pleasure is drained of vitality and joy and richness. We become stressed and exhausted and even depressed. And in fact, one feature of depression and hedonia is the inability to feel pleasure. So what I want to challenge you to do is to become really good friends with your pleasure. Start by just noticing the pleasure response in your body. So my pleasure response tend to involve sigh and my insides relaxing and my eyes closing. What does your pleasure response feel like in your body? And then make sure to enjoy it. So when you feel that way, stop and take a few moments. Close your eyes, feel those sensations, and don't feel guilty for blocking out the world and just taking that private moment for yourself. And finally, make space in your daily life for your pleasures. I recommend finding at least one pleasure you can incorporate into your morning routine. So you might take a few minutes to slowly massage moisturizer into your skin. You could take a few minutes in the shower just to revel in the sensation of that hot water. You could take a few minutes after waking up just to listen to the birds and luxuriate in the softness of your bed. Now notice that most of the things that give you pleasure are free or nearly free, and they're unique to you. So for me, going to bed early and having that extra time to myself in the evening is so nice. And it doesn't matter if no one else would see that as pleasurable. I do, and that's what matters. So don't let anyone convince you that your pleasures are wrong or inferior. If it evokes the pleasure response in your body, then it's exactly what you need to be doing. And if you're having a hard time making pleasure a habit and you would like a little extra help, then try my 4-week program in the Pleasure Principle. I'll put a link to that below. Take really good care of yourself, and I will see you next time.